The branch manager at Cumberland National Bank in Bowling Green, Kentucky, took the folded sheet of paper out of the old man's hand, looked at it for 2 seconds, and dropped it into the wastebasket beside his desk. Then he smiled. "Mr. Halloran, that's not a real deed. That's a Xerox of something from before I was born. We need a current title from the county recorder, not a piece of paper your daddy folded up in 1973. Walter Halloran was 74 years old. He was sitting on the other side of the desk in a brown jacket and a clean white shirt his daughter had ironed for him that morning. He looked at the wastebasket. He looked at the manager. He did not say anything. The manager was named Trent Boyle. He was 36 years old, an MBA from Indiana University, and he had been transferred to the Bowling Green branch 8 months earlier with a directive from regional to clear out what corporate called soft files, meaning legacy farm accounts that sat below the bank's preferred profitability threshold. Trent had a list of 47 such accounts. Walter Halloran's was number 19. Trent had spent 9 minutes on it. "Sir," Trent said, "the bank has been more than patient. The lien on the south parcel is valid. It's been on our books since the consolidation in 2004, and we've sent you 4 notices. The auction is scheduled for the 17th. If you'd like to satisfy the balance today, we can process that. Otherwise, the property goes." Walter said, "That deed in your trash can is from 1973. Trent laughed. "Mr. Halloran, even if it were original, which it isn't, a 1973 deed doesn't override 50 years of banking records." "I'll have my assistant give you a list of what we actually need." He stood up. "Have a good day, sir." Walter stood up slowly. He looked at the wastebasket one more time. The folded paper was sitting on top of a coffee cup and a torn envelope. He left the bank without it. He drove the 41 miles back to the farm in his daughter's Toyota because his own truck had given out the week before, and he hadn't yet decided whether to fix it. He did not tell his daughter what had happened in the bank. He sat at the kitchen table that evening and ate the supper she had made, and went to bed at 8:30. He lay awake until almost midnight. The farm was 212 acres in the rolling country southeast of Bowling Green in Allen County, Kentucky. Walter's grandfather had bought the original 60 acres in 1919. His father had added another 90 in 1948 and the final 62 in 1973, the year Walter came back from Vietnam. Walter had served 2 tours, 1969 and 1971, with the 1st Cavalry. He came back quieter than he left. His father met him at the bus station in Bowling Green and drove him home, and on the 2nd night Walter was back, his father walked him out to the south fence line with a kerosene lamp and showed him the new boundary stones at the edge of the additional 62 acres. And his father said, "I bought it for you, so you'd have something nobody could take." His father, Hollis Halloran, was a man who did not trust banks. He had lived through the Depression as a boy and watched his own father lose everything in 1933 to a foreclosure that the family later learned had been improperly filed. Hollis kept records the way other men kept rifles, meticulously, and for the same reason. He paid for the south parcel in 3 cash installments between February and August of 1973, and he insisted on a particular kind of deed. Walter married Ellen Pruitt in 1976. They had 1 daughter, Carla, born 1979. Ellen taught 4th grade at the Allen County Elementary School, and Walter farmed the land. They paid off the small operating loan his father had taken out in 1981 by 1981, and never borrowed another dollar. Ellen kept the books. She had a head for it. She kept every receipt, every tax filing, every land record in a cedar box on a shelf in the bedroom closet. Ellen died of a stroke in 2019. She was 63 years old. Walter had been alone on the farm, with Carla coming and going from her own house in town for almost 7 years, when the letters from Cumberland National started arriving. The first letter, dated November of 2025, claimed that an audit had identified a previously unrecorded lien against the south parcel of the Halloran property, originating from a 1971 promissory note Walter's father had signed at Allen County Farmers Bank, which Cumberland National had absorbed in 2004 through a chain of 3 acquisitions. The note, the letter said, had been improperly satisfied, and Cumberland was now calling the balance, plus 43 years of accrued interest, totaling $186,000. The letter gave Walter 60 days. Walter brought the letter to Carla. Carla read it twice and said, "Dad, this isn't real. Granddad paid that off." Walter said, "I know he did." Carla said, "Then we need to find the proof." Walter went into the bedroom that night and opened the closet and took down the cedar box from the shelf. He had not opened it since the week after Ellen's funeral. He sat on the bed for a while before he lifted the lid. Ellen had organized the contents in folders by decade. Her handwriting was small and slanted to the right. The 1970s folder was the thickest. Inside, clipped together with a blue paper clip, were 3 documents. The 1971 promissory note from Allen County Farmers Bank, marked "Paid in Full" on August 14, 1973, signed by a loan officer named Russell Tatum. A receipt for the final cash payment, and a deed. The deed was for the additional 62 acres his father had bought in 1973. It was the original. Walter had not looked at it in 53 years. He unfolded it on the bed. It was a single sheet, typed, signed by his grandfather's old attorney, a man named Beaumont Cole. The front of the deed was standard: legal description, transfer of title, signatures. The back of the deed had a paragraph Walter had never read closely. Ellen had read it. Ellen had drawn a small star in pencil next to one sentence. Walter read the sentence 3 times. Then he refolded the deed and put it in the inside pocket of his brown jacket and went to bed. The next morning he drove to Bowling Green. That was the day Trent Boyle dropped the deed in his wastebasket. Walter drove home that evening without it. Carla called him at 9 o'clock. Walter told her what had happened. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Carla said, "Dad, you let him take it?" Walter said, "He didn't take it. He threw it away." Carla said, "We need a lawyer." The lawyer's name was Eldon Pratt. He was 67 years old, practiced in a small office on the courthouse square in Scottsville, the Allen County seat, and he had known Walter's father. He had not known him well, but he had known him. Pratt drove out to the farm on a Saturday. He sat at the kitchen table and Carla made coffee. Walter told him the whole thing. Pratt listened without writing anything down. When Walter finished, Pratt said, "Walter, the deed is in the bank's wastebasket?" Walter said, "I expect they emptied the wastebasket." Pratt said, "I expect they did too. But Walter, that document, even thrown away, even possibly destroyed, was your property when it entered that office. If they discarded it, that's destruction of personal property. If they kept it, that's something else." He paused. "What did the clause on the back say?" Walter said, "I'd rather you read it yourself." Pratt said, "You don't have a copy?" Walter said, "I have the original in my pocket." He took the manila envelope out of his jacket and laid it on the table. Pratt looked at him. "Walter, you said the manager threw it in the trash." Walter said, "He threw a piece of paper in the trash. I don't carry the original to a bank." Carla looked at her father. She had not known this. Walter had taken a Xerox to the bank that morning, an old Xerox from the early 80s that Ellen had made for safekeeping. He had never told the manager it was a copy. He had let the manager assume. Pratt smiled. It was the first time he had smiled all morning. He took the deed out of the envelope and unfolded it carefully on the kitchen table. He read the front. He turned it over. He read the back. He read the underlined sentence twice. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at Walter for a long moment. "Walter," he said, "do you know what this is?" Walter said, "Ellen drew a star next to it." Pratt said, "Ellen knew exactly what this was. This is a federal forfeiture covenant. Your father had it written into the deed in 1973 because he didn't trust banks. The covenant binds any financial institution that has held, holds, or comes to hold a lien on this parcel through any chain of acquisition. and it provides that any wrongful claim against the deed holder triggers automatic forfeiture of all claims, plus statutory damages at the federal level. The reason it's federal is that your father's attorney filed the covenant with the United States District Court at the time of execution. It's not a state document. It's federal. Walter said, "Is that legal?" Pratt said, "It was in 1973, and once it was filed, it bound every successor institution in perpetuity." Cumberland National stepped into Allen County farmers' shoes in 2004. They inherited the covenant, whether they knew about it or not. Carla said, "What does that mean for the auction?" Pratt said, "It means there isn't going to be an auction. It means the United States Marshal Service is going to be very interested in why a federally bound institution attempted to seize property in violation of a federal covenant. And it means, Walter, that I need you to come to my office Monday morning, and we are going to file this in federal district court in Bowling Green. And we are going to ask for a temporary restraining order and an emergency hearing." Walter said, "What about the deed they threw away?" Pratt said, "Bring me the Xerox, the one you let him think was the original. We're going to use that too." The hearing was set for the following Wednesday, Federal Courthouse, Bowling Green. Judge Eleanor Patrick Doyle, 65 years old, 22 years on the federal bench. Trent Boyle came with 3 attorneys from Cumberland National's regional legal team, all of them carrying matching black leather portfolios. They sat at the front table. Trent kept adjusting his tie. Walter came in with Carla and Eldon Pratt. He wore the same brown jacket. The deed was in his inside pocket. The bank's lead attorney, a man named Garrett, spoke for 23 minutes. He explained the validity of the chain of title to the lien, the procedural correctness of the auction notice, the bank's good faith effort to resolve the matter with the property owner. He used the word documentation 11 times. He referred to the documents Walter had brought to the branch as informal family records of uncertain provenance. Judge Doyle listened without expression. Then Pratt stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to begin by asking the bank's counsel a single question." Judge Doyle said, "Proceed." Pratt turned. "Mr. Garrett, on the morning of November 22nd, did Mr. Walter Halloran present a document to your client's branch manager, Mr. Trent Boyle?" Garrett conferred with Trent. Trent nodded slightly. Garrett said, "A document was presented, yes." Pratt said, "And what did Mr. Boyle do with that document?" Garrett said, "Mr. Boyle returned it to Mr. Halloran along with a list of required documentation." Pratt said, "Mr. Halloran tells a different story. Mr. Halloran says Mr. Boyle dropped the document into a wastebasket beside his desk." Garrett said, "Your Honor, that allegation is unsubstantiated." Pratt said, "Your Honor, I would ask the court to take judicial notice that Cumberland National's branch offices are equipped with surveillance cameras and that we have filed a subpoena for the footage from Mr. Boyle's office on the morning of November 22nd. The footage was produced to us yesterday afternoon. It shows Mr. Boyle taking the document, looking at it for approximately 2 seconds, and dropping it into a wastebasket." The room was very quiet. Judge Doyle said, "Mr. Garrett, is that accurate?" Garrett conferred again. The conferring took longer this time. Trent was looking at his hands. Garrett said, "Your Honor, the branch manager exercised his professional judgment regarding the document's authenticity." Judge Doyle said, "Was the document destroyed?" Garrett said, "The document was discarded, Your Honor." Judge Doyle said, "And was the wastebasket subsequently emptied?" Garrett said, "Yes, Your Honor, as part of standard nightly cleaning." Judge Doyle wrote something down. She did not look up. Pratt said, "Your Honor, I would now like to introduce the document Mr. Boyle discarded." Garrett said, "Your Honor, by counsel's own admission, the document was destroyed." Pratt said, "The document Mr. Boyle discarded was a photocopy. The original is in this courtroom." "May I approach?" Judge Doyle said. "You may." Pratt walked to the bench and handed the judge the manila envelope. The judge took out the deed, She unfolded it. She read the front. She turned it over. She read the back. The room waited. No one spoke. She read the back again, slower this time. She set the deed down on the bench in front of her. She said, "Mr. Garrett, are you familiar with United States District Court for the Western District of Kentucky, filing number 73-CR-441? Garrett said, "Your Honor, I am not." Judge Doyle said, "It's a federal forfeiture covenant filed by a Mr. Beaumont Cole on August 19, 1973, attached to a deed recorded that same week in Allen County. The covenant binds any successor financial institution holding any lien against the parcel described therein. It provides for automatic forfeiture of all claims, plus statutory damages of 300% of the value of any wrongfully claimed amount. And it provides further for criminal referral in cases of willful destruction of evidence related to the covenant." She paused. "Mr. Garrett, did Cumberland National acquire Allen County Farmers Bank in 2004? Garrett said, "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Doyle said, "Then your client is bound by this covenant, and the wrongful claim asserted against Mr. Halloran for $186,000 triggers statutory damages of $558,000, plus the criminal referral provision, which I will be transmitting to the United States Marshal Service this afternoon, given that the original document was destroyed in your client's office on November 22nd. Trent Boyle did not move. Garrett said, "Your Honor, may we have a recess?" Judge Doyle said, "No, the lien is voided. The auction is enjoined permanently. Damages are awarded to the plaintiff in the amount of $558,000. The matter is referred to the United States Marshal Service for investigation of evidence destruction. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down once. Walter sat at the table for a moment. Then he stood up and shook Eldon Pratt's hand and walked out of the courthouse with Carla. They drove back to the farm in Carla's Toyota. Walter did not say anything for the first 30 miles. Then he said, "Your mother knew." Carla said, "She put a star next to it." Walter said, "She put stars next to a lot of things." When they got home, Walter walked out behind the house and up the rise to the family plot under the white oak his grandfather had planted in 1928. There were 4 stones there: his grandfather, his grandmother, his father, Ellen. He stopped at Ellen's stone and stood there for a long time. The afternoon sun was low through the bare branches. He said, "You were right to put that star." He did not say anything else. He stood there until the light started to fade, and then he turned and walked back down the rise to the house. He went inside and took the deed out of his jacket and brought it into the bedroom, and opened the closet and took down the cedar box. He laid the deed flat on the bed and refolded it the way Ellen had folded it, 3 creases, the same as 1973. He put it in the 1970s folder, behind the receipt, behind the promissory note, in the same order Ellen had kept it. He closed the box. He put it back on the shelf. The next morning, he went out and started fixing the truck. There are men who keep records because they believe in paper, and there are men who keep records because they have seen what happens to people who don't. Hollis Halloran was the second kind. He spent $412 in 1973 to have a Bowling Green attorney file a covenant in federal court because he had watched his own father lose everything to a piece of paper improperly filed in 1933. And he was not going to let that happen to his son. Walter Halloran carried that deed for 53 years without ever needing it. Ellen Halloran read it once and drew a star next to one sentence. Cumberland National held a copy for 2 seconds and threw it away. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Next time, we're going down to the Texas Hill Country, where a 78-year-old widow named Imogene received a certified letter in January claiming her late husband's 300-acre ranch had been collateralized against a debt he never signed for, and where the only proof she had was a single cassette tape her husband recorded in 1991 and labeled in his own handwriting, "If they ever come asking, subscribe. We'll see you there." Paste your script.